Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It is 3 p.m. Mountain Time on January 31st, 2022. This is the notice time for the virtual technical conference in PSC Docket 2203503, application of Rocky Mountain Power for waiver of the requirement for pre-approval of significant energy resource acquisitions. I'm Sam Johnston. I am the PSC's facilitator for this virtual technical conference. And I just wanted to remind everyone that we do have a court reporter. So when you begin speaking, if you could introduce yourself, that would be helpful. And then with that, I'll turn the time over to Rocky Mountain Power. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We appreciate your participation in today's meeting. I think most of you know me. I'm Janice Saba for Rocky Mountain Power. With me today on the call is Joelle Stewart and Shay LeBray, who will be presenting today. But we also have on the call additional members of our IRP, RFP, and legal teams who will be available to answer questions if needed. To start off, Joelle and Shay will present a short slide deck that's posted to the Commission's website in the docket that just provides a very brief overview of our waiver request. It shouldn't take too long, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion and questions that parties want to have. With that, I'll turn the time over to Joelle to start the slides. And I'm actually going to share my screen, so just give me a minute.
While she's doing that, I just want to make sure you can hear me. Jana, I can see you.
I can hear you.
Okay.
And you can see, I'm glad people can hear me because I just said a lot of stuff if nobody heard that. Just give me a minute. I closed out of them. All right, here we go. Sorry, I think I've got to open up a different browser. Just give me a minute.
And I don't see, I want to make sure Shay is.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble here. Okay. I think it needs to be.
So I'll just start talking.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just give me.
I'm Joelle Stewart, Senior Vice President at Pacific Corp. So both Shay.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
Yes.
Miss Stewart, can I get you closer to the mic or something? There's some distortion, or I can't hear you very well.
How about that?
Ah, very great. Thank you.
Okay. So, and then there's Shay. Okay. So Shay LeBray and myself, we were the witnesses in our application that we filed. Just to kind of kick it off, go to just the next slide. Jana? I'm here, hold on. All right. Off and running. All right, so what we're gonna talk about, just sort of an overview of what that significant resources are, and then the reason we're requesting a waiver. So first, just to start, the definition of a significant energy resource. So under the Energy Resource Procurement Act, which is Chapter 17 of the statutes, a significant energy resource is a resource that is over 100 megawatts or more, or has a dependable life of 10 years or more. However, for a renewable resource, it's for resources over 300 megawatts. Shay is going to walk through our process of how we went through the solicitation process and how we have chosen a short list of resources, of which 5 of those qualify under this definition of a significant energy resource. So Jana, next slide, please. So on January 24th, we filed this application for a waiver of that approval process. So the significant energy resource process in the statute is for essentially pre-approval of the resources. And what we're seeking here is a waiver of that pre-approval. I'm going to come back at the end and talk about sort of the rationale and our why we're seeking an approval, as well as sort of cover why we're filing it at this time. But as you can see here, the comments are due February 7th. The process is laid out in the statute and the rules with very tight timelines that the commission and the utility and the stakeholders have to follow to determine whether or not we get a waiver. And then if we are not granted that waiver, then we have to do a full pre-approval process, which is about 120 days. So comments will be due on the 7th, and I believe a decision then is then expected by the 14th. I'm looking at Jana for validation. Yeah, okay. So these are the 5 resources that actually trigger a significant energy resource, that are a significant energy resource. Shay, do you want to touch on these?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shay LeBray with PacifiCorp, Vice President of Resource Planning and Acquisitions. As Joel noted, there's 5 resources here where we're requesting the waiver of significant energy resource approval. We had 19 projects total in our final shortlist. Of these 5 projects, we have 3 that are wind in eastern Wyoming, and 1 that is solar with storage, and 1 that is something new for us, a standalone battery. And both of those are located in Utah. So starting with the top, Boswell Springs, a wind facility. It's a power purchase agreement arrangement and up to 320 megawatts with a term life of 30 years. That has a commercial operation date of October 1st, 2024, and is located in eastern Wyoming, along with Cedar Springs 4, a wind project as well, power purchase agreement up to 350 megawatts and a term life of 30 years with a commercial operation date of December 1st, 2024. Dominguez 1 is a standalone battery, 200 megawatts. That would be under a battery storage agreement with a term life of 15 years and a commercial operation date of June 30th, 2024. And that's located in northern Utah. Green River 1 and 2 is a solar combined with storage project located in southern Utah. It's in the form of a power purchase agreement, 400 megawatts, a 20-year term life, and a commercial operation date of 12/31/2024. And Rock Creek 2, a wind project in eastern Wyoming, a build transfer agreement of 400 megawatts with a 30-year term life and a commercial operation date of December 31st, 2024. Again, all of these projects were part of the final shortlist in the 2020 All-Source RFP approved by the Commission. These are the projects or the subset of projects that meet the requirements that Joel spoke to in terms of the significant energy resource waiver approval process. Okay. So just kind of going a bit back in time here, just an overview and timeline to hopefully help kind of refresh and orient on work that has been done starting back in 2018 with the development cycle of the 2019 IRP to today. The 2019 IRP was filed in October of 2019, and it identified a need to solicit bids for up to 6,000 megawatts of renewable and non-renewable resources, plus approximately 600 megawatts of battery storage, capable of delivering energy and capacity to PacifiCorp system for service on or before December 31st, 2023. In the 2019 IRP, PacifiCorp used ABB models. So we used a system optimizer, SO, which was our capacity expansion optimization portfolio development model, and planning and risk model, our hourly dispatch or PAR model, to conduct extensive studies of various future resource portfolios, each with unique type, timing, size, and location of proxy resources, in addition to movement among existing resources in terms of their timing coming off the system. Resource portfolios were studied under a variety of price policy scenarios in the 2019 IRP, including low gas, no carbon, medium gas, medium carbon price, high gas, high carbon price, and a social cost of carbon to evaluate the reliability and performance and identify the least cost, least risk preferred portfolio. Following the 2019 IRP, we filed a notice of intent for approval of a solicitation process pursuant to the Energy Procurement Act, and based on those action items from the 2019 IRP, with modification that bids would be accepted with commercial operation dates up to the end of 2024 to allow for the extended PTC eligibility that passed during that time. The RFP was all source and by nature designed to solicit proposals from renewable resources, renewable energy combined with battery energy storage projects, non-renewable, including gas-fired generation, although I would note we didn't receive any gas-fired bids, standalone battery storage projects, and pump storage hydro projects. Allowable bid structures included PPAs, BTAs, and BSA agreements. The RFP was open to new and existing resources as well, with a minimum size of 20 megawatts, so long as they can meet certain requirements, and resources needed to be capable of interconnecting with or delivering to our transmission system in our east or west balancing areas. There were a number of minimum eligibility requirements that bidders would have had to meet in order to be eligible to proceed in the evaluation process. We reserve the right to deem proposals non-conforming and eliminate the proposal from further consideration if it didn't comply with the requirements. And we received an extensive and diverse response from the market, total capacity over 5 times what was originally sought for with the RFP. The Commission approved the 2020 All-Source RFP in July 2020, and Merrimack, the independent evaluator in Utah. The Oregon Commission also hired an independent evaluator in Oregon to oversee the process and review the evaluation of all proposals. Throughout the development and implementation of the RFP process, PacifiCorp engaged bidders, stakeholders on numerous occasions, and per Merrimack, the IE stated that we maintained a very open, transparent process, which included presentations and workshops with bidders, bidder conferences, very active Q&A process, and a formal comment process during the development of the RFP. In terms of evaluation approach, at a high level, the company utilized a 3-phase process, including reflecting PacifiCorp Transmission's interconnection queue reform. The 3 phases included first, an initial bid stage as the basis for selecting the initial short list of bids, and those bids in the initial short list would be eligible for the transmission cluster study process. The second part was the interconnection cluster study and contract development process. And then third, final shortlist selection based on including best and final offers and evaluating through our modeling with the SO and PAR models. The system value curves were developed from our PAR model simulations, and those calculated the hourly marginal system energy value of a flat energy profile and the hourly marginal operating reserve value of a flat operating reserve profile by location and under a number of price policy scenarios, including some additional sensitivities pursuant to Oregon staff requests. The resulting analysis produced a final shortlist of 19 projects, producing substantial benefits for customers while managing risk in a reliable portfolio, inclusive of the 5 projects for which we are seeking the significant energy resource waiver. I would note that we've included work papers with the filing that detail the results of the final shortlist evaluation, modeling process, and resulting in both, there's a confidential work paper folder and a highly confidential work paper folder as part of the filing. The Commission approved the final shortlist and concluded that the 2020 All-Source RFP met the requirements of the solicitation approval requirement under the Act. In parallel, the approval process, PacifiCorp was also in the process of finalizing development of our 2021 RFP, which we filed on September 1st of 2021. Of note, and I think worth mentioning, is that while the final shortlist from the 2020 All-Source RFP was included as existing projects through 2024 in the modeling assumptions, we evaluated a variant of the top performing portfolio in the 2021 RFP that essentially removed the final shortlist resources, including the associated transmission, and identified that it was over $1 billion higher cost to customers without the RFP resources along with increased market reliance, higher emissions, in addition to higher portfolio costs, further validating the customer benefits of these projects and the outcomes of the 2020 all-source RFP. I'm going to pause there. That was a lot, but essentially just, really an overview of kind of where we've been with these projects and the context and kind of where we are today. Are there any questions? Do we want to pause for questions or kind of keep going through the next slide and then open it up? What's the preference?
Yeah, maybe we just cover the next slide and then can completely open it up.
Okay.
Okay.
Back to you, Joelle.
All right. Public interest considerations. So why are we filing this application for a waiver? And particularly, why are we filing it now towards the end of January? We've known the final shortlist for a period of time. We've known these 5 resources trigger the significant energy resource decision part of the law. But frankly, we held off on filing anything to take the next steps because so much was still in play, particularly at Congress. With the Build Back Better, the infrastructure bill, and the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill in Congress obviously has already passed, but the Build Back Better bill, we were actually anticipating that actually had a good chance of passing. We didn't want to make a filing and then have to redo our economic analysis in the middle of that filing. However, we do think everything that's in the Build Back Better bill, which has tax incentives for both the resources and for solar wind, as well as transmission, will only improve the economics of what is the outcome of our current RFP. So that was not our concern, but the fact that we would have to redo those economics for that prudence decision and the specific approval process that comes with the significant energy resource. Many people on this call, including myself, we lived through this process with Energy Vision 2020 filing back in 2017. We made the filing, and then through 2018, that process, we had a lot of different iterations as things changed through the process, including a change in the tax code. We were very mindful. We've gotten a lot of feedback from parties that process was a struggle. It was a struggle for us. We recognize it was a struggle for stakeholders. We were hoping to avoid that kind of, a bit of a chaotic process and wait until Build Back Better passed and then seek our next steps in the filing. With Build Back Better kind of on hold, although we still believe some of the incentives, what we're hearing is that some of the incentives that were part of Build Back Better may still continue on. We decided we couldn't wait any longer and we needed to take action. But we do think some of those incentives, and we kind of expect to see Congress potentially move on pieces of Build Back Better going forward. We decided to file for a waiver. Part 5 of the Significant Energy Resource Decision, or the Energy Resource Procurement Act, outlines this process for a waiver of requirement for solicitation or approval. Obviously, we're not seeking a waiver of the solicitation piece, only for the approval piece for the outcome, for the resources that are an outcome of the solicitation. It sets out 3 different reasons. One is a clear emergency, one is a time-limited commercial or technical opportunity, and then C is any other factor that makes waiving the requirement in the public interest. We are not claiming that this is a clear emergency. This is not a time-limited commercial or technical opportunity. This is really what we're looking at as for another factor. We don't want this process where we're going to have to reevaluate things again, potentially. We are willing to assume that risk for prudence and cost recovery in a future rate case. And this process was, pretty clean, where we followed the solicitation process with oversight from the IE, and we've evaluated these resources through 2 IRPs. I think all of it together is why we're asking for a waiver. We know people have a lot on their plates at the moment, and I think workload-wise as well. As we thought this was an opportunity to get a waiver. This does not mean that we think any of these one items is on its own enough. I think it's a combination of multiple factors, because in the future, I don't know that we would be seeking waiver, but for the circumstances we have right now, that is really why we're seeking a waiver of the significant energy resource. And I think that's it. And then the next slide is just where you can find information on the RFP and the IRPs. So I think with that, we are available for questions.
Yeah, Jana, this is Artie. I do have a couple of questions. Let me start off with this question. I think Joelle mentioned that there were 19 projects on the short list, and these 5 trigger the pre-approval. Is the company planning on pursuing all 19 projects?
Hey, Joel, this is Shay. I can take that one if you'd like. The answer is yes. We are actively pursuing all of those projects at this time.
So then in the next rate case, it wouldn't be just the 5 projects. It would basically be 19 projects that would be reviewed, plus whatever else comes up in the rate case. I see.
Yeah.
Joelle shaking her head. So.
Yeah, and they are still in negotiations for all of those. So, but those are the ones that are currently on the short list that are being worked through.
Okay. And then just kind of a follow-on question with that. Can you kind of lay out the cost recovery timing for the pre-approval? If we were to do these 5 projects on a pre-approval versus a rate case, and I know that you're going to have to take a guess at when the next rate case would be filed, but just kind of compare those 2 timelines, if you would.
I guess, Artie, I'm not sure I'm following the difference on the cost recovery, because the cost recovery will occur on pretty much the same timeline. So if we go through pre-approval, when
I just don't, and I could have answered this by looking up the statute. What's the timeline on the pre-approval?
The pre-approval process itself is about 120 days.
Okay, and so that, assuming that they were approved, then sometime in the middle of the year, you would start collecting. Or no, that's
yeah. Not until they're actually in service. Yeah.
In service. And so that's the 2024. That's what I was thinking earlier today when I was thinking about that. Even though we would be through with the process, collection wouldn't actually start until they were in service.
Right.
So that 2024 recovery, some of these are in the middle of the year and some are at the end of the year. So let's just say 2025, January 1st. Then how would that line up with a rate case? Is there really any difference that you can see in terms of the timing of the recovery?
No. I mean, these resources, and bear in mind, most of these, particularly on the significant energy resource, these 5, all but 1, and 2, the battery, the BSA, and then Rock Creek 2, those are build transfer agreements. The others are PPAs, so those you'll see through the EBA. Then for the owned resources, those would be then through the rate case. And I think most folks know that several of these resources, or several of those on the short list, are associated with new transmission, which is in a separate proceeding for Gateway South, as well as we have, which is not a proceeding in Utah, for Gateway West segment D1. So that transmission investment is also is required for these resources or for some of the resources on the short list. And so that would also go into service in 2024. So that's really altogether, those new investments will drive a need for a new rate case with that timeline to get those into rates at the end of 2024.
Okay.
And I just wanted to clarify, when I was speaking to the 19 projects, which, as Joelle mentioned, I mean, we're actively in discussions with those, but that was the number of the final shortlist at the time that was approved. We did have one project drop out since that time. So even in the 2021 IRP analyses, we were able to update for that and reflect that change in the final shortlist. So, you know, we're currently at 18, but just wanted to clarify that reference.
Okay, thanks.
Looks like Michelle's got her hand up.
Yeah, my question is actually a very slight tangent, but could you also, and I know I could look this up, but it would take me a while to find it. Remind us of, so there's the 19, one has dropped out, that's 18, 5 are at issue here with the waiver, and that leaves 13. Out of those 13, do you happen to have at hand the data in terms of how many of those are PPAs versus BTAs?
Ron, you might have that more handy to clarify if you want to jump in terms of just the construct of the remaining bids.
Ron, or if Tom's on?
Yeah.
Because I think they're all.
Yeah, this is Tom Woodworth.
I think they're all PPA
Hi, yeah,
PSAs.
That's right. That's right, Shay. This is Tom Woodworth with Pacific Corp Legal. Of the 18 projects that we are remaining negotiations with on the 2020 final shortlist, all of them are PPAs with the exception of the Rock Creek 1 and 2 projects, which are BTAs, and the battery only project, which is technically called an energy storage agreement, battery storage agreement. It's very similar to a PPA. So essentially all of them are PPAs with the exception of those 2 BTA projects, both from the same developer.
Okay, thank you for reminding me that. I remember it from the short list, but it didn't stick in my head.
Of course, no problem.
Looks like we've got a question from Lisa next.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi there. Thank you. I am wondering, Lisa Hickey, representing the Interwest Energy Alliance. What do you have a deadline for when your remaining open negotiations will be completed, or is there a likely conclusion for those?
We don't have a hard and fast deadline. I mean, we're actively working through those negotiations. Given the different construct of agreements, and types, particularly the standalone battery, the battery storage agreement, that's something, new for us operationally in terms of the size and that type of agreement. So, working through that along with terms in the BTA, I think, tend to be complex. And so those are also ongoing in addition to progress on the PPAs.
Thank you.
It's like Justin Jetter has a question.
I don't think I've heard this covered, so hopefully this isn't a duplicate question, but with respect to the PPA, BTA options, are those still being negotiated on those projects, or are those pretty well fixed at this point that they will be whatever they're sort of assigned in your presentation?
Yeah, and again, I mean, Tom, Ron, feel free to jump in. But yes, at this time, those are the agreement structures that we're pursuing with those projects. And a lot of the projects that bid in through the 2020 All-Source RFP, several even bid in under a BTA construct or under a PPA construct as well. And all of those various options were evaluated within the modeling and analyses process. So the outcome, of the final shortlist and these projects also included the contract structure for those projects. Tom or Ron, anything else you'd want to add on that front?
This is Tom Woodworth again with Pacific Corp Legal. No, Shay, I think you nailed it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Looks like Bela has got his hand up.
Yeah, you mentioned Gateway West a few minutes ago. I think you said it was going to be in service the same time as Gateway South. Is that correct?
In my mind, yes. I haven't distinguished the timeline difference. Both, I think, were towards the end of 2024. There may be a few months difference that I don't remember.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, so then Gateway South, Gateway West, and these 18 projects would be under review in the next rate case all at the same time?
Or a rate case at that timeline, yes.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Dave Williams.
Hi, Dave Williams with the Utah Division. Just a follow up to Justin's question. I think you said that right now you're pursuing those contracts, in the format in which they're indicated, PPA versus BTA. But if some legislation did pass and, this year, is there the possibility that any of those might switch from a PPA to a BTA?
I couldn't say if that would necessarily occur, both in terms of potential legislation passing and it affecting the structure of these agreements. These are what we're pursuing. At the end of last year, with the Build Back Better Act kind of on the table, we did send a note out to bidders, acknowledging that, and if that passed, what that might look like. However, since that has, ended essentially, until it comes in some other form, but since it's ended, we're not aware right now of any other, potential legislation that might occur, particularly in the near term.
Okay, and I have a second question, if that's all right. On slide 5, which is the public interest considerations, if I were to sort of play devil's advocate, the two on the bottom, you went over the process by which these were selected, and you talked about the modeling and the IRP. To me, that shows that you did your due diligence, and maybe you think it's kind of a safe play on your part to do a waiver, but I'm not sure why that speaks to the need for the waiver.
I don't know that it's any, I don't think it's any one. I don't think the rationale that we went through the RFP process, all of that, is in and of itself probably justification for a waiver, since we expect that to be with all of our solicitations, that we have followed that process. It's really that, that in combination with this potential change in the tax code, as well as just time considerations for all the stakeholders and the company.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Looks like Lisa's got another question.
Thank you so much. In Colorado, we have a policy that promotes an even distribution between utility-owned generation projects and independent power producer-owned generation projects. That is a 50-50 split that is embedded in statute and rule and policy at the commission. Do you have any sort of similar type of policy in any of your states? Maybe not 50-50, but any, split indicating what is in the public interest to maintain a balance between utility ownership and IPP ownership?
No.
Tom, do you want to answer that one? I mean, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, sorry. This is Tom Woodworth, legal department. No, not that I am aware of. That's correct.
Thank you.
Won't see any more hands up. Anybody?
Yeah,
have any?
yeah, this is Wayne Oliver with Merrimack Energy. I have one quick question. I'm not on the online, but I'm on the phone. But question with I know you addressed the issue about the timing of negotiating the contracts. Question I have, and also the tax incentive, potential tax incentives. I think that most people expect there'll be something that'll come out of that. And my question is, if the tax incentives are put in place after contracts are negotiated, is there going to be an attempt during negotiations to include a provision in the contracts that will provide benefits to customers in the form of prices being reduced? If the tax incentives do go into place.
Hello. Yeah, this is Tom Woodworth again with Pacific Corp Legal. It's a great question. It's something that we have been discussing internally as something we may bring into the negotiations. There's an obvious challenge with that, as you can probably imagine, in terms of temporally how long such a right could be retained in the contract and not compromise financing or an understanding of benefits. And then there's also the negotiation of what that potential sharing or right. could be. I want to be careful not to get too much into the discussions we're having, and these conversations are still with these bidders are, I guess, confidential in terms of the negotiations, and I want to be careful not to tip our hat on anything. But it's certainly something that we have been considering to see if it's something that we can get that we can realistically get for the benefit of our customers. It's a great question.
Thanks. Yeah, I raised that because I've seen it happen in other cases, other negotiations in the past where people expected there would be some kind of change in the incentive structure, and it became part of the negotiations, and the utilities and the counterparties agreed to it. So it was something that has gone on in the past, I guess.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, the speaker.
Yeah, I'm Wayne Oliver with Merrimack Energy. We were the IE in the process.
I'm sorry, Wayne Allswood?
Oliver. Oliver.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Looks like Artie's got a question.
Yeah, thanks, Jana. This is Artie Powell again. I think I read this someplace, but I just don't recall off the top of my head. But could you remind us what the construction timeline is, primarily for the wind and the solar projects, to meet their online dates?
I think there's quite a bit of variability around that, but probably roughly on average about maybe 2 years.
Okay.
I think it probably is very project specific, but high level ballpark.
Yeah, I should have qualified it. That's what I was looking for, is just kind of a ballpark. I mean, I do have a couple of other questions, but if anybody else has questions, they can jump in.
Go right ahead.
I just wanted to talk about the timing of filings for just a minute, and maybe break this up into a couple of questions. And if one question is not appropriate for this particular forum, that's okay. But when under the pre-approval statute, we have about 120 days or 4 months to evaluate these resources. So that means that the company would file whatever supporting evidence and testimony they're going to file, and then parties would have maybe a month and a half to 2 months to review that and file their first round of testimony. That would leave us about a month and a half for rebuttal and sur-rebuttal testimony and a hearing. Trying to leave the commission about a month for to write an order. I don't know, Joelle or Jana, would you agree just kind of at a high level with that type of schedule?
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question, like I say, may not be appropriate here, so anybody can cut me off or just say it's not appropriate and don't answer. But if the commission were to approve the waiver and then we took these, especially these 5 resources, into a rate case, the company files a notice of intent for a rate case. I think it's 60 days in advance of the rate case filing. Could the company file whatever supporting evidence and testimony at the same time for these resources so that parties would have an opportunity to start reviewing and doing a lot of that review work? It'd be on about the same timeline as the amount of time that we would have in a pre-approval process.
Sorry, Artie, I don't think I followed. So if we get the waiver, and then you're talking about when we go in for the rate case eventually to get recovery.
Right. You're going to
okay.
file your notice of intent, right? About, if I remember right, it's 60 days in advance of the actual rate case filing. Could the company actually prepare and file its supporting testimony for these, in particular, these 5, maybe others also, but in particular, these 5 resources at the same time that they file their their notice of intent? And that would give parties approximately 60 days to review that material before the rate case is filed. And that, I mean, I'm thinking of the workload of a rate case and doing this at the same time.
And
it would be part of the rate case, right? Because you're opening that docket with that notice of intent. So it would just be filed under the rate case, and it would become part of the rate case order, but it would give parties that 2 months before the actual rate case is filed to start evaluating these projects for a prudence review.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something we could discuss later, because right now we don't have a filing plan for the timing of the next rate case.
Right.
Because if something triggers a rate case earlier, then this may be a major plan addition case, that these resources would be through. So we believe we sent the work papers now that we have now. I think as we get closer to 2024, we can, work with the DPO and the office and other parties to figure out that filing strategy.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate your participation and the good questions and discussion that we've had. Like always, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. I know it's a short turnaround, so we'll do our best to prioritize. So thanks again.
All right, if there's nothing more from anyone else, that concludes today's virtual technical conference. And thanks to everyone for your participation, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks.
Thanks.